Do I have a doozy of a story for you today? You are not going to believe this one, but we are in California, so anything is possible under the current regime here. What's up, guys? I am Dima, and first and foremost, quick update on my nose gash that I messed up the other day. If you watched my last video, I talked about it. I ran into a chandelier at a property that we were remodeling. Thankfully, it's all getting better and looking good. So thanks for your concern. A lot of you guys in the comments on my last video really gave me your well wishes and all that good stuff. So it's not that big of a deal. I just found it more funny than anything. Anyhow, let's turn to the story of the day in California. So we have some really crazy laws out here. And if you're from California, you probably know about this. If you're not from here and you just like to laugh at us, then you are going to like this story. So a couple bought a house about a year ago and they still haven't moved in.
Oh boy.
Why? Because the seller has not moved out of the property. Legally, he hasn't done anything that California law isn't letting him do under the weird California pandemic eviction moratorium and extensions thereof that have continued to go on. So let's dive in and let me give you some more details on this crazy story. And by the way, if you're thinking, why can't they get him out? What's the deal? Have they tried this? Have they tried that? I'm going to go over all those things with you. I'm going to put my legal hat back on, my attorney hat. Just kidding, guys. This is not legal advice, but I will talk about the law around this and why these poor folks that bought this house have not been able to get this seller out. And then I'm also going to talk about, generally speaking, the craziness that's going on in California and how this is allowed to happen. I'm also going to give you one of my own personal stories because I've experienced something similar. So let's dive in and take a look at the facts of this case. All right, guys, here we go. So a couple bought a home in Riverside, California, which is pretty close to me, about an hour away or so, back in January of 2020. And over a year later, they haven't been able to move in because the seller refuses to leave. So what happened was they bought this 4-bedroom house. It was $560,000. Now, in Southern California, that's actually not that much, but in other parts of the country, that's a lot of money. After the sale went through, the seller refused to turn over the keys or leave the house. And so for a year, they've been dealing with this. Now, what's interesting is that they actually closed escrow on the house weeks before the mandated lockdowns and other measures and eviction moratoriums and all that kind of other stuff. But in California, I guess that doesn't matter. You see, in California, Governor Gavin Newsom, our esteemed leader here, signed a bill extending the eviction moratorium all the way through June of this year. And so during this time, basically no one can be evicted. Now you might be thinking, but this dude is not a tenant. He was the seller of the house. They paid for the house, the escrow went through, the seller got his money and then refused to leave. Well, under California law, if he stays past the time that the escrow closes, he now becomes a tenant under the law here, and you need to evict that person just like you would any normal tenant. Crazy? Yes, but that's California for you. Now, you might also be thinking, have they tried to get him out with all kinds of other things, or did they do everything that they could to make sure that the person wouldn't stay? By the way, guys, make sure you stay until the end of this video because I'm also going to talk about ways that you can prevent this. So if you're buying a home, what you need to do to make sure that this doesn't happen to you. And if you're a real estate agent, make sure you really pay attention so that this doesn't happen to your clients. So guys, let's take a look at some of the things that people have said that the agent or the buyers should have done. The agent representing the buyers actually posted something on Facebook talking about it. So I want to go over those so that you could see what they all are and so that you could see how really none of these things could have worked. The first one is people have said, why didn't they do a final walkthrough before closing escrow? In California, we do a final walkthrough before the escrow closes to make sure that everything's good to go. Well, in this case, they did do a final walkthrough, but here in California, the sellers or the tenants don't actually have to be out of the house before that happens. So that really didn't help the situation. The next question we get is, why didn't the buyers call the police and get this person out? Well, apparently they did, But in California, the police can't really do anything in this case because it's a civil matter, which is up to the civil courts. And again, right now, the civil courts, in almost all cases, are not doing evictions because all of the laws are protecting the tenants right now. So landlords are stuck with properties where tenants aren't paying rent or paying a very low amount of rent. And then you have con artists, scam artists like this that sold the house and then just stayed there, and the police really can't do anything at all. The next one I've gotten is, why not just change the locks or turn off the utilities or do something like that? Well, guys, once again, we are in California, and landlords are not allowed to use self-help, or quote-unquote self-help measures to get tenants out. So they can't turn off utilities, they can't change the locks. In fact, if they did, then that guy would have a claim against the buyers for doing those things. So they can't do that. I believe they actually did try to turn off the utilities. The guy just had him turned back on because since he's living there, he can legally do that. The next question, of course, is why don't they hire a lawyer? Well, my understanding is that they did, and they actually hired a really good one. It's someone that I know that I refer to that does a lot of eviction cases here. But again, because of California's moratorium on evictions right now, there is absolutely nothing that that lawyer can do right now until it all gets worked out. And of course, one of the main questions that I've been asked is, why are they treating this guy like a tenant? He sold the house. Again, in California, anytime you hold over, anytime you squat at a property, which I'm going to talk about in just a second, legally, you will be considered a tenant. So while this is a con artist and scammers paradise, this is the nightmare that landlords and people like this have to deal with in the state of California. And you know, this whole story actually reminds me of something that happened to me that I went through a long time ago, back in 2008-9, when there were a lot of short sales in the market. There was a common scam going on where there were empty and vacant houses. People would actually move into them and squat and then would not move out. That happened to one of my clients on a listing that we had. I still remember it to this day. It was in a city called Glendora, which is about an hour away from me. I had to drive out to the property because we were getting ready to close escrow, and we found out that there were some people living in the house. Now, in that case, the people that moved in actually got scammed by someone else. Someone put an ad out on Craigslist or another newspaper and put the house on the market and said they were the owner. They leased it to them. They apparently paid them a security deposit in cash. They had a lease and all that stuff, and they moved in. We were able to work out a good resolution. They moved out. The buyers bought the house because the people were nice, and they're the ones that unfortunately got scammed by someone else. But in this case, the scammer is living in the house. So on that note, guys, I want to share some advice with you. I'm going to put my real estate broker, my former attorney hat on. I want to share some advice with you in this market to make sure that this kind of thing doesn't happen to you, whether you're buying a house or if you are a landlord perhaps and you own investment properties, or if you're a real estate agent representing people. So first and foremost, one of the things that we typically do a lot of times is we will allow the seller of a property to lease the property back from the buyer after close of escrow. That's called a leaseback or a holdover period. It could be a day, it could be 15 days, it could be a month, it could be 6 months. And in the past, we've done that a lot. But now, guys, my advice to my clients is just a blanket, no matter what, under no circumstances are we allowing a leaseback. Now, I know that's harsh because sometimes a leaseback is needed for sellers, especially if the sellers are buying another house, they don't want to move twice. But as the buyer, I would not allow it right now. Of course, this isn't intended as legal advice or real estate advice. Make sure you seek independent counsel and all that good stuff. Got to give you the legal disclaimer. But the thing is, in today's day and age, with what's going on in California, that seller could just stick around forever, like you're seeing in this article and in this situation here in Riverside. So flat out, I wouldn't allow any leasebacks. Another thing, guys, is I would just watch out for red flags. So, you know, if the seller is potentially having financial difficulties, if there's something else going on when you go to do the inspection, just be very, very careful about who's selling the house. That really wasn't a concern back in the day because this kind of stuff just didn't happen. But with the pandemic, with so many people on unemployment, with tenants' rights, with squatters' rights, with all that other kind of stuff in California, good, law-abiding citizens are the ones that are unfortunately getting screwed. And so you have to be extra diligent and you have to be extra careful. So whether you're a real estate agent or you're a buyer of a property, just be very careful when you're doing that. When you're a landlord, make sure that all of your leases are in writing. Do not do oral leases. If the tenant wants to stay longer, make sure you do an addendum or an extension so that you are not the subject of something like this. So guys, this is just some crazy stuff going on in California, and believe it or not, I do believe that these kinds of things are going to become more common and that they will also get worse because, as I said, first of all, we have the pandemic still going on, a lot of people still out of work on unemployment, collecting unemployment money, which also just got extended and increased thanks to the new bill that was just passed recently, of course. Also, going forward, what you have is this eviction moratorium that's still happening. So there are a lot of properties where there are people living in there for free or paying a very minimal rent. I believe 25% is still the number. Landlords, though, still have to pay these mortgages, although there are also mortgage forbearances and extensions and those kinds of things. Now, when all of this stuff hits, it might not be for 6 months, it might not be for a year, it might not be for 2 years, but what you're probably going to see is a lot of issues in the real estate market because the courts are so jammed up and all of these cases that are just sitting there are going to come to fruition. So there's going to be a lot of people that ultimately do get evicted. There's going to be a lot of tenants that are sued by the landlords in these courts. They're going to have judgments. So it is just going to be, as one of my friends says, a hot mess when all of this comes to fruition through in California. But for now, guys, what we're left with is this madness where someone bought a house, unfortunately, they're paying the mortgage unless they stopped, and the person who sold it is still living there. It's unfathomable, it's unconscionable. I can't believe that the person doing it can, really live with himself and stay there while these poor people bought the house and can't move in. And it's amazing to me that the people in California are leaders, quote unquote, like Gavin Newsom and all of the other guys and gals running around, following Gavin Newsom around, are allowing this kind of stuff to happen while they dine at French Laundry. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it's a tough lesson. I know this is a harsh one. Thanks for tuning in as always. Make sure you follow me over on social media. I'm on all of the platforms, but Instagram is the one that I'm really on the most. So follow me over there. The link's down below, and I will see you on the next video.